For 5,000 years, the Zorvax Dominion had ruled the galaxy through brutality, conquest, and fear. They had crushed entire civilizations, wiped out species, and enslaved countless worlds without resistance. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever dared. When the Zorvax set their eyes on Earth, they saw nothing but another weak species waiting to be conquered. They had faced advanced empires before, ones with massive fleets and devastating weapons, and obliterated them effortlessly. Against humans who had barely begun colonizing other planets, it wasn't even a contest. The invasion began with shock and awe. Massive warships hovered over Earth's atmosphere, raining fire and destruction on its greatest cities. New York, London, Beijing, gone within hours. Millions perished before Earth's governments could even coordinate a defense. The Zorvax warlords laughed, calling it one of the easiest conquests in history. They broadcast their declaration of victory across the galaxy. They thought the war was over. They were wrong. Humanity did not surrender. They did not kneel. They did not break. Instead, they did something the Zorvax had never seen before. They adapted. They learned. And then they started hunting their hunters. The first sign of trouble was supply routes being disrupted, entire convoys disappearing without a trace. Then the Zorvax officers started dying, not in battle, but assassinated in their own command ships. Human ships, small, fast, and impossible to track, began striking from the shadows, picking off Zorvax fleets one by one. Then came the psychological warfare. Zorvax generals woke up to hack transmissions, images of their own cities burning, their own people screaming in terror. Soldiers began deserting, terrified of the silent, unseen enemy that lurked in the darkness. By the time the Zorvax High Command realized the true horror of what they had unleashed, it was too late. Because humans don't just fight to win, they fight to end you. And now, the most feared species in the galaxy was about to learn the hard way. Never start a war with humans. The Zorvax Dominion had been the unchallenged rulers of the galaxy for centuries. Their empire stretched across thousands of star systems, their fleets blotting out suns. Their warriors feared across countless worlds. No species had ever dared to stand against them, not because they lacked weapons, but because they knew resistance was futile. The Zorvax did not conquer with diplomacy or mercy. They believed in one thing: absolute power through absolute fear. They had fought mighty civilizations, races with advanced weaponry and vast fleets, and had crushed them effortlessly. Compared to those great empires, humanity was nothing. At least, that's what they thought. At the time of the invasion, humanity was barely known in galactic politics. They had only a handful of colonized worlds, a few military fleets, and were still new to space travel compared to the other major species. The Galactic Council, a governing body of neutral races, had dismissed humans as unremarkable, too small to matter, too weak to be a threat. When the Zorvax warlords set their sights on Earth, they expected an easy victory, a single overwhelming strike, and humanity would fall to its knees like every other species before them. The Zorvax didn't negotiate. They sent a fleet of over 1,000 warships, more than enough to eradicate any resistance before it could even begin. The attack was swift and devastating. Earth's orbital defenses were destroyed within hours. Major cities were bombarded into ash. Entire nations were wiped off the map. Survivors were enslaved, forced to work in Zorvax-controlled colonies. The Zorvax commanders laughed as they declared Earth's immediate surrender to the rest of the galaxy. The Galactic Council watched in silence, unwilling to risk their own peace for a species they had considered insignificant. But what the Zorvax failed to understand, what no one in the galaxy had ever considered, was that humans do not break the way other species do. Yes, the invasion had been devastating. Yes, billions had died. But humans are not a species that accepts defeat. They don't just survive, they evolve. They adapt. Unlike the countless species before them who had crumbled under Zorvax rule, humanity did something different. They disappeared. What remained of Earth's military forces, scientists, engineers, and survivors vanished into deep space. retreating into the shadowy void beyond the reach of the Zorvax. What looked like surrender was actually calculated silence. For the first few months, the Zorvax believed the war was over. They had already moved on to their next conquest, thinking humans had been dealt with. They never saw the first attack coming. A Zorvax supply convoy vanished without a trace. Then a warship was found drifting, its crew missing, its systems hacked. Entire battalions stationed on conquered human colonies began disappearing overnight. This wasn't an organized army fighting a conventional war. This was something far worse. The Zorvax had not conquered humanity. They had created something new, a force that was learning, evolving, and turning every Zorvax strength into a weakness. By the time the Zorvax realized what was happening, it was too late. They hadn't destroyed humanity. They had awakened it. The Zorvax Dominion had believed humanity was defeated. They had crushed Earth's military, destroyed its cities, and enslaved its people. To them, humans were nothing more than a conquered race, another insignificant footnote in their long history of domination. But the first mistake of every fallen empire is believing the war is won before it's truly over. For months, there was silence. No transmissions, no signs of human resistance. The Zorvax warlords celebrated, declaring their conquest of Earth complete. But then, the first Zorvax warship went missing. At first, it was dismissed as a mechanical failure. Then, another warship vanished. And another. Entire fleets were being picked apart in the Outer Rim, where human survivors had gone into hiding. The Zorvax commanders panicked, believing it to be some rogue faction. But as they investigated further, they discovered something terrifying. This wasn't just a few scattered survivors. This was organized. This was war. The Zorvax still controlled most human colonies, using them as supply hubs for their war fleets. One such planet, Proxima 9, housed a critical fuel depot, a massive orbital station used to refuel Zorvax warships. One evening, the Zorvax fleet stationed there received a distress signal. A human transport ship, badly damaged, drifting, was broadcasting an SOS. A small team of Zorvax patrol ships approached, expecting to capture the last few stragglers of the human race. That's when the trap was sprung. The moment the Zorvax ships locked onto the human vessel, their entire fleet was disabled. EMP charges, hidden inside the ship, detonated in an instant, disrupting every Zorvax system within range. Before the Zorvax could react, human stealth ships emerged from the darkness. They weren't warships, not in the traditional sense. They were hacked, repurposed Zorvax vessels, completely invisible to enemy sensors. In less than 7 minutes, the entire fuel station was destroyed. Every single Zorvax soldier on the ground was executed. The remaining warships, powerless, were boarded, hijacked, and turned against their own empire. It was a massacre. The Zorvax had expected direct battles, like they had fought against other species. They expected humanity to fight like an army. But this was not a conventional war. This was guerrilla warfare on an intergalactic scale. Humans didn't fight fair. They fought to win. The Zorvax Dominion had no idea what was coming next. The Zorvax Dominion had started to notice something troubling. Their supply lines were being cut, their warships were disappearing without a trace, and human colonies they thought were under control were suddenly erupting in violent uprisings. The war they had declared on humanity, which should have ended in days, had stretched on for months. Yet, the Zorvax were still arrogant. They believed these human attacks were nothing more than the desperate actions of a defeated race. The Dominion still had its main war fleets, and they were convinced that one decisive strike would finally crush humanity for good. That victory, they believed, would come at Epsilon Prime. Epsilon Prime was one of the last human colonies still standing. It was a vital outpost with advanced factories, research labs, and hidden military bases. The Zorvax saw it as humanity's last stronghold, the final piece that needed to be wiped off the map before humans could no longer resist. They sent a fleet of 50 warships, fully prepared to reduce the colony to nothing but dust. The plan was simple: exterminate every human left on the planet. But this time, humanity was ready. When the Zorvax fleet arrived in Epsilon Prime's orbit, they expected a fight. Instead, they were met with silence. There were no human warships, no planetary defenses, no signals at all. The planet looked abandoned. Assuming the humans had finally realized their fate and fled, the Zorvax lowered their defenses, preparing to land and claim their victory. Then their communications went dark. Then their engines failed. Then their shields shut down. Without realizing it, the Zorvax fleet had walked straight into a human trap. The entire planet had been turned into an electromagnetic warfare zone. Human scientists had developed a way to scramble Zorvax technology, shutting down their ships before they even knew what was happening. The moment the fleet was disabled, human stealth ships, hidden on the dark side of Epsilon Prime's twin moons, launched their attack. Missiles, railguns, and EMP strikes rained down, tearing through the Zorvax fleet before they could even fire a single shot. The flagship's command center was hacked, sending false orders across the fleet, causing confusion and panic. Some Zorvax warships fired on their own allies, thinking they had been betrayed. At the same time, human ground forces struck. Soldiers in advanced exosuits launched a full-scale attack on the Zorvax-controlled cities. They moved quickly, eliminating Zorvax troops in brutal close-quarters combat. The city streets became a battlefield, with human forces outmaneuvering the invaders, using speed, stealth, and sheer determination to reclaim what was theirs. The battle did not last long. Within minutes, the Zorvax fleet was in complete disarray. Their command ship, the Dreadnought-class Tyrannies, was boarded by human commandos. The Zorvax generals, who had expected to sit comfortably while watching humans be slaughtered, were dragged from their command chairs and executed. Their deaths were recorded and broadcast across the entire Dominion. The Zorvax had never faced anything like this. Their empire, which had ruled for thousands of years without question, was now watching in horror as their best fleets were being torn apart by the very species they had underestimated. News of the defeat at Epsilon Prime spread fast. Zorvax-controlled worlds, once confident in their safety, began to panic. Some colonies started revolting, fearing that the humans were coming for them next. Others begged for reinforcements, but no one knew how to stop an enemy that fought in ways the Zorvax had never seen before. For the first time in 5,000 years, the Zorvax Dominion felt fear. And this was only the beginning. After the devastating loss at Epsilon Prime, the Zorvax Dominion was shaken. Their warships had been reduced to wreckage, their high-ranking commanders executed, and their once unbreakable fleet had suffered a defeat unlike anything in their history. But they still held on to their arrogance, believing that if they could regroup and launch a stronger offensive, they could crush humanity once and for all. They were wrong. What followed was something the Zorvax had never faced before, not a war of weapons and armies, but a war of fear, deception, and complete psychological domination. Humans understood something that the Zorvax did not. The Dominion had built its empire on fear, but fear was a weapon that could be turned against them. While the Zorvax expected humanity to engage in more battles, to continue fighting with brute force, the humans instead took the war to a level the Zorvax were completely unprepared for. They did not just want to win battles. They wanted to make the Zorvax afraid to even step into human-controlled space. It started with misinformation. Human operatives, many of whom had been captured and enslaved early in the war, had been biding their time. They infiltrated Zorvax communications, spreading false reports of entire fleets vanishing without a trace. These messages contained details so precise that the Dominion's high command began questioning whether they had a traitor in their ranks. Paranoia spread among their officers. Soldiers began fearing that the humans had a weapon even greater than anything seen at Epsilon Prime, something that could destroy fleets without a fight. Then came the disappearances. High-ranking Zorvax officials, governors of conquered planets, and fleet commanders began vanishing without explanation. One by one, they were taken in the dead of night, leaving no trace behind except for a chilling message. You started this war. We will end it. The Zorvax initially dismissed these as isolated incidents, but when entire command stations were left abandoned, with their occupants missing, panic set in. The worst part? The humans never left bodies behind. No one knew if they were executed, tortured, or worse. The not knowing was what truly broke them. Humans also turned the Dominion's own technology against them. They hacked into Zorvax fleet systems and began broadcasting terrifying messages. Zorvax soldiers, accustomed to being the hunters, were now waking up to hack transmission feeds showing their own warships burning, their own cities in ruins. Some were even shown recordings of human prisoners from the beginning of the war, tortured and executed by the Zorvax, now accompanied by a simple message: "We remember." The Dominion had always believed themselves superior, but now they were being forced to relive the horrors they had inflicted on others. Worse yet, humans did not just attack Zorvax soldiers. They turned their own people against them. News of the human resistance spread across the Dominion, and suddenly Zorvax-controlled colonies were no longer as loyal as they once were. Species that had once bowed to the Zorvax in fear now saw the humans as proof that the Dominion was not invincible. Slave revolts erupted, and in some cases, entire fleets defected, preferring to take their chances siding with the humans rather than being caught in the inevitable destruction of the Zorvax Empire. The Zorvax High Command scrambled to contain the damage. They increased patrols, doubled their security, and executed anyone suspected of aiding the humans. But the fear only grew. They now saw shadows in every corner, traitors in every rank, and an enemy that never fought them directly but still managed to destroy them piece by piece. Soldiers who had once marched proudly into battle now hesitated before every deployment, whispering about the ghosts in the dark, the ships that never returned, the planets that simply stopped responding. Entire fleets began refusing to enter human-occupied space. The stories had spread too far. Zorvax soldiers started deserting in record numbers, some abandoning their posts and fleeing to neutral space, others even surrendering to humans, believing captivity was a better fate than facing whatever horrors awaited them in battle. The Dominion had once conquered entire civilizations with fear. Now, that same fear was turning against them. And for the first time, they realized what true terror felt like. Humans were not just fighting to survive anymore. They were hunting the hunters. The Zorvax Dominion was collapsing. For the first time in its 5,000-year history, the empire that had ruled through fear, conquest, and absolute dominance was on the defensive. Their fleets, once unmatched, had been crippled by human ambushes, hacked systems, and internal betrayals. Their soldiers, who once marched into battle without hesitation, now refused to fight, fearing the ghosts in the dark, fearing humanity. With entire Zorvax colonies revolting, their military crumbling, and their leadership in disarray, humanity knew it was time to end this war once and for all. The United Human Resistance, a coalition of surviving Earth forces and newly liberated species, had prepared for this moment for months. The target was Zalthor, the Zorvax homeworld. If they could take the heart of the Dominion, the Empire would fall. Unlike the Zorvax, who relied on brute force, humanity had a plan, one final, devastating strike that would make sure the Dominion never rose again. The attack began in silence. Using captured Zorvax warships, human commandos infiltrated the planetary defense systems without raising alarms. Over the past months, human hackers had already compromised most of the Dominion's networks, planting backdoors into their security protocols. When the attack began, every orbital defense system on Zalthor shut down simultaneously. Then, the real war began. Human warships descended from the dark void of space, moving with precision and deadly efficiency. The once mighty Zorvax Navy, already weakened by months of losses, barely had time to react before entire fleets were obliterated in minutes. The humans weren't fighting a battle. They were executing an enemy. On the ground, Zorvax leaders scrambled to respond, but it was already too late. The moment their fleet fell, human strike teams stormed the capital, targeting key government buildings and military installations. Zorvax High Command, The warlords who had ordered the attack on Earth were hunted down one by one. Some tried to flee, escaping into underground bunkers, but humanity had already mapped every escape route. Some begged for mercy, offering surrender. None were given. Within hours, the war was over. The Dominion's ruling council was executed on live broadcasts, their own communication systems hacked and used against them. Cities that had once revered the Zorvax, as gods watched in stunned silence, as the empire that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was no more. Zalthor burned, not from orbital bombardments, but from its own citizens rising up. As human forces withdrew, the remaining Dominion worlds descended into chaos, their leaders dead, their fleets gone, their people free for the first time in generations. The Zorvax had once believed that fear was the ultimate weapon. They had used it against the galaxy for centuries. But in the end, it was fear of humanity that destroyed them. The war was over. Humanity had won. And the galaxy would never forget what happened to those who tried to wipe them out. The war was over. The Zorvax Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, had been shattered beyond repair. Their homeworld lay in ruins, their fleets were nothing but drifting wreckage, and their armies had been either executed or had surrendered in terror. The species that had once ruled through fear and absolute power had been reduced to scattered remnants, hiding across the galaxy, hoping to avoid the fate of their leaders. But humanity did not claim their throne. Unlike the Zorvax, humans had no interest in conquering the galaxy. They had fought this war not for power, but for survival, vengeance, and justice. They could have taken control of the shattered empire, imposed their own rule, and become the new dominant force in the universe. Instead, they left behind only a message. We are peaceful until we are not. Let this be your only warning. The fall of the Dominion created a power vacuum across the galaxy. The Galactic Council, which had once dismissed humanity as insignificant, now viewed them with awe and fear. The Council attempted to send envoys to negotiate with Earth's new leadership, hoping to bring them into the fold, to control them before they could grow into something even more powerful. But humanity did not seek alliances. They returned to their own worlds, focused on rebuilding. The ruins of Earth were restored, colonies were re-established, and those who had fought in the war became legends. Some of the newly freed species, those who had suffered under Zorvax rule, offered themselves as allies, hoping to forge bonds with the species that had done the impossible. The Galactic Council soon realized something terrifying. Humanity had been an overlooked species, barely considered worthy of attention before the war. Now they had proven themselves to be the deadliest force in the galaxy, not because of their weapons, but because of their unbreakable will. And the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. The Zorvax had ruled through fear. Now humanity was the name that made entire worlds tremble. The war that had started with the Zorvax, believing humanity, was week-ended with their complete annihilation. What was once the most feared empire in the galaxy had been reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. Their cities lay in ruins, their fleets were erased, and their soldiers, once the enforcers of terror, were now fugitives hunted across the stars. The species that had once ruled through fear and absolute power had learned the hard way what happened when they underestimated humanity. But the most surprising part? Humanity did not claim victory with arrogance. Unlike the Zorvax, they did not install a new empire, did not demand submission, and did not seek revenge against the rest of the galaxy. They had fought to survive, not to conquer. And that was what terrified the Galactic Council the most. If humanity had been this unstoppable when they were just fighting to exist, what would they become if they ever decided to expand? If they ever chose to rule? The galaxy watched in silence as humanity returned to its own worlds, focused on rebuilding rather than domination. Some species, those who had once suffered under Zorvax rule, saw humans as liberators and sought to forge alliances. Others, especially those who had once mocked or dismissed Earth, now viewed them with a quiet, growing fear. Humanity had been an unknown race, considered too weak to matter. Now, their name alone was enough to send a warning across the stars. They had been forced into war, and they had ended it on their terms. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Never start a war with humans. You won't survive it.